Hello there. This is a video, part of a series of videos on answering the critics. The goal is to help Christians know how to respond to the criticisms that non-Christians bring to the Christian faith, the Bible, and things like that. So if you are not a Christian and you're watching the content of this video, I ask you to please consider that the goal of this video is not to answer your questions and all of your questions. The goal is to help Christians know how to respond to that. Now, I will respond to your questions, so if you have questions, you can put them in comments. I'll gladly respond to them. But again, just keep in mind, my goal isn't to answer all your questions. And also, just the nature of people's tolerance to be able to watch lengthy videos is low. And so I try to keep the videos short, which means I'm limited on the amount of answers I can give in any one video. It's the reason for the series of videos. And even in the series of videos, there's still not enough content to answer all questions. Just because there's an unanswered question doesn't mean Christianity's false. And I ask you to please consider that. And please consider viewing the whole content before you jump on something. And if you don't have time to view the whole content, I completely understand. But don't pounce on us if you haven't actually given us due consideration. So I would greatly appreciate you doing that. So if you are a Christian and you are struggling to answer some of the criticisms that people bring to Christianity, here's one of them. People will often point out the fact that Christians have done horrible things throughout history, especially you take staunch, aggressive atheists who are trying to tear down Christianity, like Sam Harris, which I've taken some of his comments I've heard point in this direction, that Christianity is a flawed, bad viewpoint to have, way to approach life, and the reason is because Christians do bad things. The examples that are given are like the Crusades, though the Crusades in and of themselves, if you were to look into them, are not entirely all Christians bad and Muslims and others were not bad. That was a kind of a mixed breed of mixed bag of things there. But nonetheless, there were Christians that did cross lines in those Crusades and do some bad things. You had Christians who did slavery and demeaned humanity and treated humans very badly and justified it with the Bible. So that's a problem that hangs out there for us in history. You have in our country that just kind of fed into a number of race issues that Christians did a lot of bad things in the name of Christianity. You have the Inquisitions, which the Roman Catholic Church executed a number of people for having different views. You take the Salem witch trials in Massachusetts in America. You take a number of other things that individuals have done in the name of fulfilling some kind of God-given vision from the Christian God. So what do we do with that? And does that prove that Christianity is not a true, right way to approach life and to view life? Well, the Bible actually anticipates this and explains these dynamics, and I'll put these verses in the description below. But Paul says in Romans 2:17-24, "But if you call yourself a Jew and rely on the law and boast in God and know his will and approve what is excellent because you are instructed from the law, and if you are sure that you yourself are a guide to the blind, a light to those who are in darkness, an instructor of the foolish, a teacher of children, having in the law the embodiment of knowledge and truth, you then who teach others." Now, so you have this person who knows. You have a person here that has a viewpoint, a Christian viewpoint, and they're ready to present that viewpoint to others. Then Paul continues and says, "You then who teach others, do you not teach yourself? While you preach against stealing, do you steal? You who say that one must not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? You who abhor idols, do you rob temples? You who boast in the law, dishonor God by breaking the law. For as it is written, the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you." So you have people who will go out there and proclaim the Christian worldview, and Paul is saying, here's the danger. Now, we should proclaim the Christian worldview, but the danger is if you're proclaiming the Christian worldview, which has as a part of it morality, that we're supposed to live a certain way, and you're presenting that to others, and then you behave in an immoral, poor, ungodly, unrighteous way, that causes the unbelievers to blaspheme God, because they look at you, the representation of that viewpoint, and they see that that's ugly, and they reject the viewpoint based on you. Now, that's understandable that people have that reaction, but what we want to try to help non-Christians understand is that any one person should not discount the entire viewpoint. And we don't do that with so many other groups. But sometimes we do, because we live in this, cancel culture type society today, that if someone does one thing bad, then that means everything they've ever said, ever done is wrong. And that's something we have to wrestle with people on what truth is, because truth is separate from people. So, for example, like science, gravity. There is a gravitational pull towards the earth, and we experience it, and we can demonstrate that. It doesn't matter if some scientist who promotes the idea of gravity does something that's wacky and not scientific at all, does not mean that gravity isn't true. A mathematician, just because a mathematician gets a math problem wrong, does not mean when that mathematician says 2 + 2 is 4 is wrong. We know that 2 + 2 is 4, despite that a representative of mathematics has gotten mathematics wrong before, and they hold to that view. So just because there are Christians who did slavery and promoted it, who did the Inquisitions and the Salem witch trials, and who did the Crusades and other horrible things, just because there were people who claim the name of Christianity and promote its viewpoints, do bad things, that does not mean that the viewpoints themselves are incorrect. Those people just become a bad representation of it, which the Bible gives additional clarity on that. In Matthew 7:15-20, Jesus says, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles? So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will recognize them by their fruits." So there are people who will promote the Christian faith that are not Christians themselves, and will do it for selfish reasons, and maybe even with intentions of deceiving others. So just because we have a claimed representation of the Christian faith does not mean that they are a correct representation of the Christian faith. And so I cannot reject the Christian worldview because of the viewpoint of one or even a group of claimed Christians, because there can be people who make false claims of Christianity. Now, I want to urge you to help people, point people in the direction of that the Bible is the revelation of what the Christian worldview is. And so if you want to accuse Christianity, you have to go after the Bible. Now, that is precisely what some people have done. But if we're dealing with the attack of Christians have done bad things, that you can defeat by, again, helping people see that just because representatives of the Christian faith do bad things does not mean that the Christian faith is false. So we have to help people see that. Now, this links into a philosophical battle that we have in our culture today between progressivism and conservatism. It plays itself out in politics in progressiveness. It tends to be in the liberal camp and in the Democratic camp, and conservatism ends up being in the conservative and Republican camp. You also see Christians that are wrestling with these ideas of progressivism and conservatism. And the reason why that's there, and both are actually Christian viewpoints, we do want to progress in our lives and as societies, but we want to progress in the right direction. So there is a need to progress. There is a need to, because we've gotten it wrong, because we do bad things, we need to recognize or have flaws. We need to recognize this is bad. We need to progress from it. We need to change. And so it's good to do that. But also, it is concerning because sometimes what happens is people in our past set certain things up because to prevent they discovered bad things that were going on, bad things that were happening, and they realized it was happening because of these kind of behaviors or doing these kind of things or doing this will prevent those kind of outcomes. And so they made decisions, set up institutions and structures and order in order to bring the most good. And at the time, for them, it was progressive. Well, now that we're looking back on it, it's no longer progressive. Progressive tends to go to change things. But what if because I think we should progress and change things for the better. But what if the thing that's sitting there that we can't figure out, why is this needed? Why is this useful? Let's just throw it out because I can't figure out the value of it. Conservatism says, let's be careful throwing things out like ideas and viewpoints, worldviews, and institutions, because what if that came into being to bring about some progressive good? And if we, without knowing why it's there, throw it out, we will suffer the consequences of whatever that thing was holding back. And so that's the reason for conserving things. And we want to wrestle between the two of these. I hope you hear me. I'm not taking a side of progressivism or conservatism, but I want you to hear the battle of those two fights. And this idea of throwing out the Christian worldview because of people who are representing it in a faulty way is problematic, and we want to be careful not to just throw it out. And it's related to this progressive and conservative battle. We want to be careful throwing it out. Now, just because traditionally some Christians have held certain views doesn't mean that they are biblical either. So we want to progress past those things. So we want to make sure we're bringing the Bible to the table, but we want to think logically. And with your non-Christian friends and relatives, you want to wrestle with them over, does a person who claims Christianity as their worldview doing a bad thing mean that the Christian worldview is false? And if you can really walk them through that, that'll make the Crusades and slavery and the Inquisition and the Salem witch trials and anything else completely irrelevant to the question, is the Christian worldview true? It can't defeat it if you have a right viewpoint. So I hope that is useful to you as you wrestle through faith issues. If you need some help in that or have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. I'd be glad to answer them. If you're on Facebook, you can message me. I'd be glad to respond to you that way. If you are a non-Christian, again, I'll be happy to respond to your questions. But again, I just ask, please be respectful and open-minded to all that I described in the opening of this video. Now let's continue to be truth seekers. May God bless you.